In this village, the sun comes up around 10 in the morning, and it is gone by 2 in the afternoon. 4 hours. That is the entire window an entire village has to pull 5,000 kilograms of food out of a lake sealed under 1.5 meters of solid ice. Not a week, not a season. 4 hours of light at 71 degrees below zero. And that number, minus 71, is not really a temperature. It is a deadline. Because at this temperature, everything you can name has a countdown attached to it. Bare skin, exposed to this air, 90 seconds. A man who goes through the ice into the water beneath, 3 minutes, maybe less, before his muscles stop taking orders. A fish pulled out of that water onto the surface, under a minute, and it is no longer a fish. It is a stone. Nothing here is measured in effort. Everything here is measured in time. And in the line of people walking out onto that lake this morning, there is one man who does not belong there anymore. He's 28 years old. He left this village 6 years ago for Yakutsk, and he is wearing a city coat and gloves he bought in a store. He came back to bury his father. And this morning, without asking him, they handed him a rope. Now watch what they do first, because the first hole they cut is in a place where every single person out there knows there are no fish. Not a single one. And they cut it anyway. And watch the woman standing at the edge of the ice, the one who never touches a net and never touches a fish. She counts, and then she counts a second time, and the second count is not about fish at all. They have 4 hours, and at the end of those 4 hours, this village is going to learn something about itself that has nothing to do with fish. To understand why 4 hours matters, you have to understand what those 4 hours are working against. This is Yakutia, in the Russian Far East, a territory larger than Argentina, and the calendar here is not divided into 4 seasons. It is divided into 2. A short, violent summer and 7 months of winter. The ground underneath is permafrost, frozen solid hundreds of meters down, and it does not soften. You cannot plow it. You cannot plant in it. So for more than half of every year, these people live inside a civilization with no agriculture at all. And that is where the math stops being poetic and turns brutal. A grown man working outdoors in this cold burns 4,000 to 5,000 calories a day. Not to get stronger, not to get ahead, but simply to stay alive until tomorrow. Multiply that by every mouth in the village, then multiply it by 200 days of darkness, and the number you get is not a boast. 5,000 kilograms of fish is not a triumph. It is the minimum. It is the thin line between this village and March. And here's the part almost nobody tells you. The part that changes how you see every person standing on that ice. The Saka were not born here. Their ancestors were Turkic horsemen and cattle herders from the warm southern grasslands, from the country around Lake Baikal. They were people of grass, of saddles, of summer. And then they went north. Pushed out, or choosing to leave, we will never fully know. And they walked into the coldest place human beings have ever agreed to live in. And they brought the horses with them. Horses do not belong here. Horses should not be able to exist here. So, over generations, the Saka bred a new one, short, thick-coated, able to dig through snow for frozen grass and stand outside through 60 below without shelter. They did not simply adapt themselves. They rewrote the animal that came with them, which tells you what survival in a place like this actually is, and it is not what you have been told. It is not endurance. Endurance only kills you more slowly. Survival is agreeing to be rewritten. The Saka left the steppe behind, in their blood, in their houses, in their hands, and in exchange, the North let them stay. But a people who have rewritten themselves once can be asked to do it again. And right now, under their feet, something is beginning to change. What they are about to do out on that lake has a name. They call it the Munka, and it is not a man going fishing. It is a machine. And the parts of that machine are people. It begins with that first hole, the one cut where everybody knows there are no fish, and here is why. That hole was never meant to catch anything. It is the test hole. They cut it and they measure, and what they are measuring is the thickness of the ice before 100 human beings and several tons of gear walk out across black water. Because the question you ask a lake in Yakutia is not whether it has fish in it today. The question you ask is whether it intends to kill anyone today. And the answer comes back written in centimeters. When the answer is acceptable, the machine starts. And the machine has to solve something that sounds impossible out loud. They need to spread a net hundreds of meters long underneath a solid sheet of ice. They cannot see through it. They cannot dive beneath it. And the sun is already climbing. So they cut dozens of holes, in 2 long arcs curving out across the lake like a pair of arms closing. And not one of those holes is placed by guesswork. Every position was decided before anyone picked up an axe, by men who have hauled this lake for 40 winters and carry its floor in their heads. Then comes the old solution. A long wooden pole goes into the water, and it floats upward until it lies flat against the underside of the ice. At the next hole down the line, a man drops a hooked stick into the freezing dark, feels for the tip of that pole with nothing but his hands and his memory, catches it, and drags it forward, hole to hole, meter by meter. It is threading a needle through fabric while blindfolded, and they will do it dozens of times, and the clock never stops running. And at the 4th hole, the man who came back to bury his father is half a beat late. Nobody shouts at him, nobody corrects him. The man beside him simply reaches over, does his job for him, and then goes back and does his own. And that silence humiliates him more deeply than any shouting could have. By the 2nd hole, his store-bought gloves are already soaked through, and he watches what the others do instead. They plunge their bare hands into the water, pull them out, and let it freeze until a thin shell of ice closes around their skin. Out here, ice is the insulation. You have to get wet in order to stay dry. Meanwhile, the 2 arms of the net close into a funnel, and every fish in that stretch of lake is being driven toward one final hole. And there is no shouting anywhere on that ice, no orders, no foreman, only the sound of poles tapping in rhythm, a rhythm nobody teaches and nobody is allowed to break. An 8-year-old holds a rope, an 80-year-old points. There is not one unnecessary person standing on this lake. And that is what breaks him. In Yakutsk, he could disappear for a week and nobody would notice. Out here, he is half a second slow and the whole machine stutters. In the city, he was replaceable. On this ice, for the first time in 6 years, he was necessary. And it terrified him. Part 4. The Hall and the Second Count. Approximately 430 words. Then the last hole opens, and the lake gives up everything it has been holding. Fish come pouring out onto the surface, hundreds of them, then thousands, a river of silver spilling across a plain of white. And they do not thrash for long. In under a minute they stop moving, and they do not die slowly. They turn to stone. What you are watching does not look like a catch. It looks like a harvest being reaped in metal. And in that moment, the cold, which has spent all morning trying to kill these people, quietly changes jobs No salt, no smoke, no fire, no electricity. Nothing has to be done to this fish at all, because this place is the largest freezer on Earth, and it costs nothing to run. Back in the village, cut straight down into the permafrost, are the bulus, ice cellars carved into ground that never thaws, holding below freezing in July as reliably as in January. Cold storage that has been running for centuries without consuming a single watt. And out on the ice, before anyone goes home, they eat. They take a frozen fish, shave it into curls as thin as paper, and swallow it raw, standing in the wind. They call it stroganina. It is not a delicacy. It is instant calories poured into a body that is losing heat faster than it can produce it. And it is the only way to eat food that will freeze solid in your hands if you hesitate. And while all of this is happening, the woman at the edge of the ice is counting. She counts the fish first, and then she turns her back on the lake, and she counts again. This time, she is counting people, but not the ones who are standing there. She is counting the houses that sent nobody today. The old, the widowed, the sick, the house that just had a funeral. And the first share of that entire haul goes to those names before a single person on that ice touches a single fish. Not the strongest hauler, not the man who owns the net. Nobody. And this is the moment you finally understand what the munka actually is. It was never a food run. It is an inspection. Every winter, the lake asks this village exactly 3 questions. Do you still have enough hands to pull? Do you still have anyone left who can read the ice? And do you still remember who eats first? The fish are a byproduct. What they are really harvesting out there in 4 hours of light is proof that the village still works. Because at 60 below, greed is simply a poor strategy. Next winter, the strongest man on this ice could be the one lying in a bed, and his name will be in the second count. Sharing here is not generosity. It is insurance. And every person on that ice is paying the premium. Which is also why, before the nets ever went into the water, they fed the fire. They threw food into the flames and asked the lake for permission. And that is not decoration. It is a contract they sign against themselves. Take enough. Never take everything. Because the lake does not belong to this winter. It has to still have fish in it for the winter their grandchildren will have to survive. And the man who came home to bury his father stands there with his soaked city gloves, listening to the woman read out the names. His father's name was on that list last year. The Saka rewrote themselves once, when they left the grasslands and walked north into the ice. And now the ice is asking them to do it again. Because the permafrost is thawing. Ground that has not softened in tens of thousands of years is going soft. The land is sinking, houses are tilting, and enormous craters are opening in the middle of the taiga forest, where the earth has simply collapsed into itself. And in the villages, the bulus, those ice cellars that have run for centuries without a single watt of power, are beginning to drip. For 300 years, the cold was the one thing these people could count on. The freezer is failing, and nobody built a backup because nobody ever imagined they would need one. And while the ground softens, something quieter is happening above it. The young people are leaving, to Yakutsk, to Moscow. The machine made of people is losing its parts. They can still cut a hole in the ice. What they cannot do is fill the hole in the second count. Then the 4 hours are gone. The sun drops at 2 in the afternoon, and the machine takes itself apart and becomes 100 human beings walking home across the snow. dragging tons of frozen fish behind them. And the man who came back to bury his father, 28 years old, ruined gloves, fingers he cannot feel, does not walk toward his car. He walks toward the village. We do not know whether he stayed. The village does not know either. But next winter, the lake will ask again. The lake always asks again. We call these people primitive, but the modern world has one thing they have never had, and we call it convenience. We never have to see who feeds us. The food appears. The power runs. Someone, somewhere, does it. On that lake, nobody is granted that privilege. You can see the entire supply chain of your own life, and every last one of them is standing 20 meters away from you, on the ice, and they know your name. The lake gives them 4 hours. It has never once asked them how hard they worked. It only asks one question every winter in the dark. Is anyone still counting? Next time we go to Alaska, into the interior forests, where the Athabascan people held back 40 below inside a house with no chimney at all, and where the smoke that should have killed them was the very thing that kept them alive. Subscribe